The whole thing started with sound no grown man should ever hear alone in the woods. Something between a child's whimper and the low croak of an animal that knows it's being hunted. Mark Devlin wasn't a thrill-seeker. He wasn't some conspiracy-drunk wanderer chasing silhouettes in the trees. He was a former search and rescue volunteer from Oregon who'd spent more time in the timberline than in his own living room. The man knew every rustle, every bird call, every snap of underbrush that belonged to the Pacific Northwest. But this sound? This didn't belong to anything. It was early October, cold enough that every breath came out like smoke. Mark had hiked deep into the Cascades to clear his head after losing a co-worker in a logging accident, a death he felt partly responsible for. Nature had always reset him, but today the forest felt off. Still, heavy, like the canopy was holding its breath. The noise came from near a fallen cedar about 30 yards off the trail. Mark listened, hand instinctively hovering over the bear spray on his belt. Another whimper, softer this time. Definitely a child's voice, yet with an odd growl underneath, like a second set of vocal cords trying to mimic human speech. He moved closer. The closer he got, the more the air smelled wrong. Wet fur, copper, and a thick musk that didn't match any animal he'd ever worked around. Then he saw it. A small figure crouched beside the log, knees tucked to its chest, shaking violently. At first glance it looked like a child covered in mud and leaves. But when it lifted its head, the truth hit him like a punch to the ribs. It wasn't human, and it wasn't an animal. It was both. Brown fur, matted and tangled. Small, but muscular frame. Eyes that were too large, too expressive, too intelligent. A young Bigfoot, 3, maybe 4 feet tall, staring at him with a fear so raw it made Mark freeze in place. Before Mark could speak, the creature did. Not clearly, not perfectly, but the rough, guttural attempt was unmistakable. Help, hurt, help. Mark's throat went dry. It had spoken, not mimicry, not the parroting of a sound. Actual speech. The creature clutched its left arm. Blood soaked through its fur, dark, thick, and dripping onto the leaves. Something had slashed it deep. Mark dropped to a knee, palms open. "It's okay," he said, voice low, steady. "I won't hurt you." The creature blinked confused, then flinched as a crack echoed through the trees. Not a branch. Not an animal. A gunshot. Then another. Mark instinctively shielded the young Bigfoot, pulling it behind the fallen log. The creature whimpered, clutching his jacket with shockingly human desperation. Someone was out there. Someone shooting. And they weren't firing at Mark. They were firing at the child. He whispered, "Who's after you?" The creature struggled to form the word, but it got it out. "Men." Mark peeked over the log. Between the trees, he caught a glimpse of movement. 3 figures in tactical gear sweeping the forest with rifles fitted with suppressors. No insignias. No markings. Clean, coordinated movements. These weren't hunters. This was a retrieval team, and Mark had just stepped into something far bigger than anything he'd ever imagined. The young Bigfoot tugged on his sleeve again. "Help, please." Those 2 words hit harder than the gunshots. Mark's instincts, his training, his sense of right and wrong, everything collided at once. Whatever this child was, whatever the hell was going on, it didn't deserve to be hunted down like an animal. He made his decision. "Stay close," he whispered. "We're getting out of here." Mark grabbed the creature in his arms, surprisingly lightweight for its size, and sprinted through the underbrush as the suppressors hissed again. Bark exploded from a tree beside him. Something zipped past his ear. Another round. They weren't warning shots. They were trying to kill the child. The forest blurred around him. Roots, rocks, branches tearing at his sleeves. He'd carried injured hikers before, but nothing like this. Every few seconds, the creature muttered words, broken English, half-formed syllables, desperate breaths. "Men take family, cages, cages." Mark's stomach twisted. This wasn't the first time these men had come for them. Behind him, he heard the tactical team picking up speed. Coordinated footsteps. Radio clicks. They were spreading out, forming a perimeter. This wasn't just a random mission. It was a cleanup. Mark slid down a slope, boots digging into the dirt, and ducked behind a cluster of boulders. He set the young Bigfoot down and checked its wound. The gash was deep, far too clean to be from an animal. A blade had done this, a large one. The creature's breathing quickened, eyes wide with panic as it listened to the approaching footsteps. Then it said something that made Mark's blood run cold. "They kill Mother." Mark froze. "What?" The child swallowed hard, words rough but clear. "They kill Mother. Now kill me." The woods went silent, and Mark realized something brutal, something undeniable. He wasn't rescuing a wild creature. He was rescuing the last survivor of a slaughter. And those men hunting them? They weren't going to stop. Not until the child and Mark were dead. Mark had been chased before, by wounded elk, by territorial bears, by panicked hikers who thought he was a threat in low visibility. But this, being hunted by trained, silent, heavily armed operators moving with machine-like precision, this was different. This was surgical. The young Bigfoot pressed against him, trembling with every crunch of boots drawing closer. Mark counted 3 sets, maybe 4, moving in a coordinated grid. These weren't weekend warriors. They were sweeping the forest like they'd done it 100 times. He mouthed a single curse under his breath. Then he acted. He scooped the child up again, ignoring the hot blood soaking through his sleeve, and bolted downhill. The slope was brutal, but he used gravity as an advantage, letting his weight and momentum carry him. Branches whipped his face. Mud slid under his boots. The forest blurred into streaks of green and brown. The child's grip tightened around his collar. Faster. Another suppressed round cut through the air. It shaved bark off a tree inches from Mark's head. They weren't firing to wound. They were firing to eliminate. He veered left, crashing into thicker brush. Brambles clawed his arms. Thorns ripped at his pack. The noise behind was growing. Branches snapping. Boots hitting dirt, the crisp, controlled breathing of men who did this for a living. He needed an advantage. A distraction. Something. That's when he spotted it. A narrow ravine ahead, carved out by a winter stream that hadn't run in months. 2 steep rock walls, 10 feet deep. If he jumped in blind, he'd break an ankle or worse. But staying above ground guaranteed a bullet. He made the call. He jumped. For 2 seconds, gravity swallowed him. The world spun weightless, terrifying. He tucked the child tight to his chest and slammed into the ravine floor, rolling instinctively to absorb impact. Agony exploded through his shoulder. His knee cracked against stone. But they were alive. And for the first time, the forest went quiet. The child whispered, "Hide." Mark forced himself up, limping deeper into the ravine. The terrain was jagged, unpredictable, a natural labyrinth. The tactical team reached the ridge seconds later, flashlights slicing through the trees. One voice, calm, controlled, spoke into a radio. "Target is wounded. Handler terminated. Child is priority. Authorization to use lethal force on civilian confirmed." Mark froze mid-step. Civilian. That meant him. Someone had officially greenlit his death. The voice continued. "He's faster than projections. He's heading southeast. But he won't outrun us. Proceed with Protocol 9. Protocol 9. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew it wasn't good. He motioned for the young Bigfoot to stay low and followed the ravine deeper. Every step jolted pain through his leg, but adrenaline kept him moving. The walls narrowed, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. The child suddenly tugged his sleeve. "Smell danger." Mark's breath hitched. "You mean them?" The child shook its head slowly. "No. Big danger." Before Mark could ask what that meant, the forest above him erupted with a sound so unnatural it felt like the air itself cracked. A deep, vibrating hum. Too low for a human throat, too steady for an animal, too controlled for an accident. The child curled into itself, covering its ears. Not good, not good, not good. Above, the tactical team went silent. Every boot step stopped. Radios hissed. Someone whispered urgently. Acoustic device activated. Keep helmets sealed. Then came the second wave of the sound, stronger this time. It vibrated through Mark's ribs, rattled his teeth, made his vision shake at the edges like heat rising off asphalt. He dropped to a knee, head pounding. "What is that?" The child grabbed his wrist with surprising force. "Men use sound, find us, make us weak." Through the haze of pain, Mark understood. It was a tracking device and a weapon. They weren't just hunting the child. They were flushing it out. He had one option left, and it was insane. The ravine split into two narrow slits. One continued deeper into shadow. The other angled upward toward a slope he recognized from earlier hikes. If he could reach that ridge, there was an old fire lookout, abandoned but still standing. A vantage point, a temporary shelter. But the second path, the upward one, was steep, slippery, and half collapsed, and the tactical team was already repositioning above them. Mark gritted his teeth. "We're taking the climb." The child looked up at the jagged rock wall and whispered, "Fall die." Mark tightened his grip around the small creature. Better than getting caught. With one push, he began the ascent, hand over hand, boots scraping rock, leg trembling. The hum intensified, vibrating the stones. He kept climbing anyway. Halfway up, a loose rock gave way. His foot slipped. His stomach lurched. But the child wrapped its arms around his neck and whispered, "Hold strong." It shouldn't have helped, but somehow it did. He pushed upward, inch by inch, until his fingers hooked over the top edge. He hauled himself over, dragging the child with him. Then he saw it. Something that froze him more than the gunfire had. At the tree line, no more than 30 feet away, one of the tactical operators stood there calmly, helmet visor reflecting the moonlight, rifle already trained on Mark's chest. He hadn't heard him, hadn't sensed him. The man was already waiting. And for the first time, Mark saw the patch on the operator's vest clearly. Not a government agency, not a military unit. It was a white insignia shaped like a vertical eye. The same symbol folklore researchers had reported near Bigfoot sightings for decades. The operator spoke through his helmet modulator, voice cold and absolute. Put the specimen down and lie face first on the ground. You've seen too much. You're not leaving these woods. The young Bigfoot clung to Mark's shirt, shaking violently. Mark, run. But there was no way out. Not forward. Not backward. Not alive. Then something happened. Something the operator clearly didn't expect. The child stepped in front of Mark, raised its small hand, and spoke with a voice that was suddenly deeper, older, resonant. No. The air itself seemed to bend. The trees trembled. The ground quivered, and the operator's rifle jerked sideways as if yanked by an invisible force. Mark staggered back in shock. The child had done something impossible, and the operator knew it. His calm tone cracked as he shouted into his headset. "Protocol breach. The child has awakened. I repeat, the child is awakened." Mark didn't understand what was happening, but one thing was now certain. This was no ordinary creature, and whatever had just awakened inside it was the reason men were ready to kill for it. The operator's voice cracked in the forest, answered with sound that seemed older than guns. Mark felt the air itself thicken, like the hush that falls before a storm. The child's hand was still raised, knuckles white with strain, but its eyes were different now. Not just frightened, but ancient somehow, as if centuries sat behind those irises. The operator's finger twitched on the trigger and then froze. Something invisible gripped his wrist. He looked down as if expecting to find a rope and found nothing. His knees buckled. The rifle clattered from his hands and skittered into the leaves, but no one moved to pick it up. Around them, the rest of the team faltered. Radios emitted harsh feedback. A pair of men who had been closing in suddenly stumbled as if someone had shoved them into a wall. One operator dropped to a knee and started retching. Mark's own breath hitched. Pain radiated from his shoulder, his leg burning with each heartbeat, but in that moment it felt incidental, like sunburn in a hurricane. "Where are you?" The team leader barked into the silence, voice shaking now. The child lowered its arm and spoke again. This time the syllables were cleaner, less like desperate mimicry, and more like language forming itself around an idea. "Leave." It wasn't just a word. It was an order, a pressure on the mind that left a ringing in Mark's skull. The operators looked at one another like men who had glimpsed a mirage and wondered if their training accounted for divinity. A pale, brittle laugh came from the leader. "Get up," he ordered, voice thin. "Get up or we'll—" And then he did the only human thing left. He obeyed the compulsion and scrambled his feet as if pulled by a string. He looked at the child with something like worship and fear. "Withdraw. Now!" The leader told his team, voice mechanical. He barked coordinates into his radio. Something clipped and urgent. "Return to base. We'll escalate remotely. Leave the area." The team moved as one, not with the confident sweep Mark had seen earlier, but with a hurried, clinical retreat of men emptying a crime scene. They melted back through the trees, weapons abandoned, visors fogging. Within minutes they were gone, leaving an unnatural silence that screamed in Mark's ears. Mark sank to the ground. Trembling, the child slid down beside him, head heavy against his shoulder. It wept quietly, soft, animal noises that made the hair on Mark's arm stand up. "You saw that," he whispered. He tasted copper and saw stars. The pain in his leg pulsed like a second heartbeat. The child nodded slowly, eyes half closed. "Wake, old voice. Make them leave. But it hurts." Mark reached to touch its arm and felt not fur, but the coarseness of a creature that had grown from the soil. It was warm, damp, living and fragile. "Who are they?" he asked. His voice was small. "Who are those men?" The child fought for the words. "They take, put in cages, make small ones talk, break them. It stopped," knuckles whitening. "They killed my mother. Little ones taken, big ones gone." Mark's stomach turned. He had the sensation of standing on the edge of a cliff and, without any desire to, watching the world rearrange itself. "Why would they do that?" he asked. The child sniffed. It answered with a crude categorization of an adult vocabulary, the way vagrant phrases get assembled into meaning over time. "Money, power, secrets. They want what we know. Secrets." Mark echoed. The child's face folded in memory. Something both beautiful and horrific. Smell of earth. Hear of trees. We whisper to roots. We know sleeping things. They want to wake them. They think we make them strong. They put our kin in cages to take that knowing. They cut. Cut. The single syllable landed like a hand on Mark's throat. He closed his eyes. The wound in the Bigfoot child mirrored 1,000 atrocities he'd read about in news reports that blurred into one another. Poachers, traffickers, clandestine labs. But this was different. This organization wasn't cash and gun. It was surgical, patient, and informed by science. Mark's military instincts reasserted themselves like a muscle memory. He had a phone, no signal, of course. The operators had gone quiet. Whatever they weren't calling the nearest sheriff. They were handling this on their own terms. "Do you have a name?" Mark asked the child. It blinked, like a child deciding a new word. "They call me Pint sometimes, because small. But I have other names in my mind. I don't remember new words sometimes. You can call me Koa." It spat the word out as if it tasted right. "Koa," Mark repeated. The name fit, short, stubborn, earthy. He felt a pang of protectiveness, so forceful it rattled his chest. "Look," Mark said, "we need to move. We can't wait for them to come back with more men." Koa looked up, then did something that made Mark's breath catch. With small deliberation, it reached into its pack, the thing men sometimes mistake for playthings, and pulled out a crude map, a scrap of fabric wired with threads, bark, and weather-beaten symbols. It pointed at a place on the map, a river, a crossing, a dotted line leading to a grid of small boxes. "Cages," Koa said. Mark studied the fabric. The boxes corresponded to a clearing he recognized, an old logging road turned impromptu compound. He thought of the operator's radio. "Return to base. We'll escalate remotely." If the boxes were cages, the base was no longer a rumor. "We're going into their belly," Mark said. Koa's gaze was steady. "We go. Find mother. Find others. Kill bad men." Mark swallowed. The word kill sat heavy. He was not a killer. He had been in search and rescue, not in raids. But Koa's anger was not sterile vengeance. It was a raw hunger to stop the rot. He thought of the dead logger, his guilt twisting like a nail. He thought of the look Koa's eyes had given him when it first spoke. There was a confession there, an unspoken plea that he not let them erase this child. "We do it smart," Mark said finally. "No heroes. We're getting proof first, names, numbers, anything. We expose them, then we bring them down." Koa's little chest rose with a laugh that was half sob. "Expose," it repeated. "Make world know." Mark laid his palm on Koa's fur. It flinched at first, then leaned into the touch like an old dog. For a moment the forest felt like a living room, the ravine a safe haven. And then, as if the woods itself were remembering who had intruded, the ground trembled in a low, far-off way. A branch snapped somewhere deeper in the pines. Mark looked up. Across the ravine, through the thinning trees, a light blinked. An artificial orange that didn't belong in nature. It pulsed once, twice. Then it stopped. A single, silent drone of distant machinery sighed through the canopy. The operators were not retreating to a base to escalate remotely. They were coordinating a solution. Surveillance, reinforcements, extraction. They would be back. And when they returned, they wouldn't be alone. Mark breathed in the forest air, tasted its wet, iron tang, and felt the gravity of the decision he was making. "We don't have tools," he said aloud. "No backup. We'll be walking into a nest." Koa blinked and placed a small hand over his. "You not alone," it said simply. "You my person now." The word was ridiculous and perfect, and something that lodged in Mark like a seed. He had no idea what he was becoming. Guardian, accomplice, witness. But the path had been set. The only choice was how far he would go. He rose, joints protesting, making choices as if on a chessboard where every piece could die. "Then let's find the truth," Mark told Koa, voice steadying under the weight of resolve. "We'll get names. We'll get proof. And if they try to stop us, we'll burn their secrets down." Koa's smile was feral and brave. It revealed tiny, human-like teeth and a determination older than their hunters' patents and white insignias. They moved out of the ravine and into the trees, limping, liminal, and wholly alive. Behind them, far deeper than either of them could hear, something in the earth shifted, like the slow breath of planet itself, an answer to the child's call. It was not loud. It was not thunder. It felt like history waking. What followed would force Mark to choose between his life and his conscience, and to reckon with what people do when power finds a secret it can exploit. Mark and Koa moved through the undergrowth with the caution of fugitives and the desperation of survivors. Every whisper of wind sounded like a footstep. Every shifting shadow carried the weight of pursuit. The operators might have retreated, but men who operated with precision didn't flee. They repositioned. They recalculated. They returned. Mark checked his watch. They'd been moving for nearly 40 minutes since the encounter. His leg throbbed with every step, but he pushed on. Koa trotted close beside him, sometimes tugging his sleeve, guiding him toward the nuances of safer paths, avoiding dry branches, shifting his weight over moss-covered stones, reducing noise the way the forest itself had taught its own children. The deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. Birdsong stopped. Humidity thickened. The smell of machinery replaced the scent of pine. Koa paused abruptly, nostrils flaring. "We close," it whispered. Mark scanned the terrain. The old logging road lay ahead, but someone had carved a new path. Fresh tire tracks pressed into mud, deep enough to belong to armored vehicles. The forest canopy overhead had been thinned in a perfect rectangle, leaving a grid-like opening to the sky. Satellite access. Drone clearance. Infrastructure for a hidden operation. Mark knelt behind a fallen tree and motioned Koa to stay low. He took a moment to catalog everything he saw. 2 watchtowers disguised with bark-pattern camouflage netting. A chain-link perimeter fence lined with motion sensors. A small generator shed humming quietly. A row of metal containers partially buried into ground, gray, insulated, and bolted shut. Cages. The same ones Koa had marked on its crude map. Mark's jaw tightened. This wasn't a poaching site. This wasn't a survivalist camp. This was infrastructure built by people with funding, planning, and zero oversight. Koa's breathing hitched. Its eyes locked on one container in particular, marked not with a white eye symbol, but with a number, AR-07. The child whispered, voice cracking. That one, Mother was in there. Not anymore. Mark's hand closed into a fist. He didn't have the luxury of mourning. He needed evidence. A voice drifted from the watchtower, conversational, bored. Team Delta's late. Think the civilians' bodies already been scavenged? Another voice chimed in lazily. Doesn't matter. HQ wants the kid. The rest is cleanup. Arbor wants results before the month ends. Arbor. There it was. A name. A code. A clue. Project Arbor. Mark whispered to himself, tasting the implications. Arbor. Tree. Growth. Roots. Nature. Something biological. Genetic. Koa tugged his sleeve again and pointed toward the far corner of the camp. See, friend. Mark followed his line of sight. At first he saw nothing, just foliage and a faint shimmer heat above it. Then, with careful focus, he realized what he was actually seeing. A pair of eyes. Amber, glassy, wide with terror. A second young Bigfoot, smaller than Koa, crouched outside the fence, pushing against a gap barely large enough for an arm. Its fur was ragged, dirty, and clumped with dried blood. Koa inhaled sharply. Loma. It whispered a name or something close to one. The moment was broken by a clatter of metal. A guard tossed a bucket out of the container row. Scraps of food, bones, unidentifiable chunks. The smell hit Mark instantly. Rot, iron, sour decay. Loma flinched at the noise and darted backward into brush. The guard didn't notice. His radio buzzed. HQ wants a specimen test in 30. Get AR-04 ready. Specimen. Test. Mark's pulse hammered. If they didn't act now, whoever AR-04 was wouldn't survive the night. He turned to Koa. Its eyes were set, lips pulled tight. It wasn't the same terrified creature from earlier. Something older was rising inside it. The same force that had bent the soldier's will. You want to go in, Mark said. Koa nodded. We must. Then we need a plan. Mark sketched it quickly. 1. Create a distraction on the north tower. The tower had the least visibility and only one guard. A thrown rock could buy time. 2. Breach the fence through the gap Loma used. Koa and Loma were small enough. Mark would have to force it. 3. Get to containers and open AR-04. Whatever or whoever was inside needed out. 4. Grab evidence from the admin tent. There had to be paperwork, files, drives. 5. Escape before reinforcement arrive. It was a plan built on desperation. But desperation had kept Mark alive this far. He turned to Koa. Once we're inside, you stick close. No running ahead. Koa nodded but added with quiet seriousness. You stick close too. Mark cracked a grim smile. Deal. They crept forward, past the underbrush, past the generator hum, until they were crouched behind a stump not 20 yards from the tower. Mark picked up a rock, weighed it in his palm, then pitched it to the far side of clearing. The rock struck metal. The guard jerked upright. What the... He swung his flashlight toward the noise. Mark whispered, Now! They ran. He and Koa slid through the fence gap. Mark's jacket snagged on a wire. He tore it loose with a muffled grunt. They moved behind the first container row. Koa pointed to one with a faded stencil. AR-04. The padlock was industrial, reinforced. No breaking that quietly. Koa, Mark whispered, can you? Before he finished speaking, the padlock clicked open on its own. Koa's eyes dimmed with strain. Old voice, it panted. Hurts, but can. Mark opened the container and froze. Inside, a small Bigfoot, smaller than Koa, barely toddler size, was strapped to a metal chair, electrodes taped to its skull, tubes running from its arms into a humming machine. Its chest rose in shallow, labored breaths. Its eyes fluttered open. It whispered one word. Cold. The cruelty wasn't just physical, it was systematic. Mark gently unstrapped the creature and lifted it into his arms. It was freezing, its body temperature dangerously low. likely from whatever machine it had been connected to. "Koa," he muttered, "find Loma. Bring her here quietly." Koa nodded and vanished into the dark between containers. Mark held the tiny creature close. Rage boiled in his chest, hotter than fear, sharper than pain. How many lives had these men stolen? How many secrets had they buried under guise of science? His thoughts were interrupted by approaching footsteps. 2 operators, talking casually, heading straight for AR-04. Mark ducked back, pressing against the metal wall, heart hammering. The tiny Bigfoot in his arms whimpered. The footsteps grew louder, closer, 10 feet away. Mark had seconds. No weapon, no cover, nothing but instinct. Then a rustle overhead, a pine cone dropped. Then another, a series of soft clacks on the metal roof. The operators paused. What the hell is? A shadow dropped behind them. Fast, low, silent. It lunged. The operators barely made a sound before they hit the ground, choked unconscious, expertly, efficiently. Mark exhaled a shaky breath. From the shadows, emerging slowly, came Koa, but not alone. Behind it was Loma, frail but fierce-eyed, and another figure, larger, older, barely 5 feet tall but powerful, with dark fur and a scar across its shoulder. A juvenile Bigfoot, a survivor, not a child, almost adolescent. Mark stared. "Oh my God," he whispered. "How many of you are here?" The adolescent stared back with something like sorrow. Then it pointed at the ground between them. 12 footprints. 12. 12 captives. 12 cages. 12 stolen lives. But only 3 stood in front of him now. The others, gone. Mark clenched his jaw. "Then we're getting the rest," he said. "All of them. And we're ending this." Koa nodded, but the adolescent stepped forward and pressed a hand to Mark's chest. It whispered a new word, a word filled with warning. "Arbor awake." Before Mark could ask what that meant, a siren erupted across the compound. Lights flared. Drones lifted from the trees. Men poured from the admin tent, armed and shouting. They had seconds. Koa grabbed Mark's hand. The adolescent grabbed the others. "Run," Koa rasped. "Now." The first stun round detonated against the metal container behind them with a blinding flash, and the real hunt began. The compound erupted into chaos. Floodlights snapped on, cutting through the trees like white-hot blades. Alarms wailed. Boots thundered across metal walkways. Drones buzzed overhead, small, fast, engineered for surveillance and incapacitation. Mark barely had time to register the danger before Koa yanked his arm. "Move!" They sprinted across the open space between container rows. The adolescent Bigfoot, older, stronger, terrified yet composed, held Loma and the tiny, half-conscious AR-04 against his chest as if they weighed nothing at all. Mark's injured leg screamed with every step, but he didn't slow down. He couldn't. A drone locked onto their heat signatures. "Aerial Unit 3, target acquired." A spotlight pinned them. Then, crack, crack, crack. 3 stun rounds exploded in rapid succession, slamming into the ground behind them and throwing a rain of dirt into the air. Had they been closer, they wouldn't be running. They'd be convulsing on the ground. The adolescent Bigfoot roared, low, vibrating, primal. Something in the air shifted. A wind Mark couldn't explain brushed against him. The drone's flight stuttered. It dipped left, then right, then fell, hard, crushing itself against the fence in a shower of sparks. Koa gasped, clutching its head. "Not me?" It panted. "Not my voice." That was him. Mark glanced at the adolescent. What can he do? Koa's answer was chilling in its simplicity. More. No time to think. A squad of operators rounded the corner ahead. For men, rifles raised, helmets gleaming under the lights. They spotted Mark instantly. Target visual, civilian with specimens. Terminate the man, sedate the creatures. Mark reached instinctively for a weapon he didn't have. The adolescent Bigfoot stepped in front of him. One operator fired a stun round. The adolescent caught the projectile in midair, and crushed it in its palm like brittle ice. The operators hesitated, blinking, processing, recalculating the threat level. That hesitation lasted half a second too long. Koa raised its hand. The air around the soldiers flexed, like cloth pulled taut, and their helmets slammed backward into the metal wall behind them so hard the steel dented. All four dropped unconscious. Mark stared, jaw slack. "Koa," he whispered. "What the hell are you?" The child trembled violently, as if its entire nervous system was burning from the strain. "Not magic," it said. "Not miracle. Old part of us. Old part you humans forgot." Then it sagged and nearly collapsed. Mark caught it. "We need shelter," he murmured. Koa shook its head and pointed to the admin building at the far end of the compound, the place the soldiers had rushed out from, the place where decisions were made, where experiments were planned, where secrets were kept. "We go in," Koa rasped. "Find Arbor." Mark swallowed hard. That was suicide. But so was staying here. He nodded once. "Let's move." They sprinted low, weaving through shadows, until they reached the structure. It looked like a large timber cabin at first glance, probably blend with the environment, but up close, Mark saw the truth. Steel beams disguised with wood paneling, reinforced windows, electronic locks, hidden cameras, a fortress pretending to be a shed. The adolescent Bigfoot pulled the locked door with one hand, veins bulging under its fur. Metal groaned. Bolt snapped. The door swung open. Inside was a different world. Cold white lights, stainless steel counters, computers, medical tools, binders lined in perfect rows on a shelf. And at the center, a glass chamber filled with a dim green light. Mark approached the chamber slowly. Inside was a cylindrical core, humming like a heartbeat. Wires, tubes, and a thick network of biological tissue wrapped around a central column that seemed to pulse like muscle. Something alive and engineered at the same time. A steel label read. Mark's entire body went cold. "This isn't a research project," he whispered. "This is a bioweapon." Koa touched the glass, flinching at the cold. "Not weapon," it murmured. "Beginning." Mark turned sharply. "What do you mean, beginning?" Koa stared at the pulsing mass, eyes full of strange, haunted recognition. "Long before your people came, the forest made guardians. My kind came from that first seed. We were meant to watch, not fight, to grow, not kill. But men took the seed, twisted it, made it want more, wake more." Mark's pulse hammered. "You're saying this thing, this arbor root, is alive?" Koa nodded slowly. "Alive and calling." Mark's throat went dry. "Calling what?" The adolescent answered this time, its voice deeper, older. "Us." Mark staggered back. That's why the operators feared the children awakening. That's why they were caged. That's why their families were slaughtered. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were connected, because their powers were not random mutations. They were responses, echoes, instincts waking up inside them. Arbor root wasn't a power source. It was a parent, and the children were evolving. Mark opened the binders on the table, scanning the contents. His breath caught at one page. Project Arbor, Phase 3 objectives. Complete neural mapping of juvenile specimens. Catalog psionic anomalies. Harvest viable gene strands. Initiate root resonance protocol. Prepare activation of genetic arboreal synchronization. That last line chilled him. What in God's name is genetic arboreal synchronization? A voice answered behind him. "It's the end of the forest as you know it." Mark spun. An operator stood in the doorway, but not like the others. No helmet, no mask, no tactical gear, just a lab coat, glasses, a calm, unsettling smile. Dr. Elias Warren, the lead scientist. Koa hissed and stepped back. The adolescent Bigfoot growled, but Dr. Warren raised his hands casually. "No need for hostility. I'm unarmed. You're in my workplace, after all." Mark tightened his stance. "You did all this," Mark said. "These cages, these kids, their mother." Dr. Warren nodded without remorse. "Necessary casualties in pursuit of evolution." Mark could barely contain his rage. Koa's voice trembled. "You hurt my family." Dr. Warren exhaled through his nose, almost bored. "We didn't hurt them. We studied them. We advanced them. And now you've awakened abilities we only theorized." He stepped closer to the glass chamber. "You've done me a favor." Mark snapped. He lunged forward, but Warren tapped the tablet on the counter. The compound doors sealed shut. Heavy metal bars slammed into place. Lights flickered red. Warren's voice turned cold. "You're not escaping, Mr. Devlin." He tapped another command. The arbor root pulsed harder, faster, as if responding to his voice. The juvenile Bigfoot dropped to a knee, clutching its head. Koa screamed. The tiny AR, 04 convulsed in the adolescent's arms. Mark realized what was happening. The arbor root wasn't just alive. It was waking up, and it was controlling them. Dr. Warren smiled like a man watching a predictable experiment unfold. "Welcome to Phase 4. The chamber lights blaze white. The root convulsed, expanding against the glass. Mark grabbed Koa. "Koa, what is this?" Koa's voice cracked. "Arbor waking all of us." The adolescent let out a roar of pain. A loud, violent crack echoed through the room. The glass chamber began to splinter. Dr. Warren's grin widened, and Mark realized the truth. Whatever arbor root really was, it was about to break free.